We're ready when you are.
Good afternoon. The date is June the 5th, 2012. I am John Daniel Begg, speaking to you from Washington, D.C. The subject of this address is unemployment and poverty in the United States, primarily occasioned by the Panic of 2008. The Panic of 2008 is viewed by some people as being simply a finance matter, but in fact the most disheartening fallout of the Panic of 2008 has been people losing jobs, many of them good paying jobs, many of them in mid-career, that are never going to come back under the present conditions. This is an election year, a general election year. You may say to yourself that you have no power, politicians don't care about you. 98% of the time, you are correct. They couldn't care less about you. But during a general election, politicians must pay attention to you. Because if they don't, you'll vote for someone else and they won't have a job. So we need to do a number of things. We need to have an idea that we want accomplished, and then we need to know how to exert pressure on various elements of the society to get our idea made into law. When the Japanese attacked the United States, December 7th, 1941, the very next day, President Roosevelt called an emergency meeting of both chambers of Congress and demanded that they vote articles of war against the Empire of Japan. I suggest to you that the economic condition with respect to jobs and poverty in the United States is equally as serious, if not more serious, than the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. I called upon the President to call a joint session of the Congress as quickly as possible to meet at Washington and to vote a very simple law into law in two parts by unanimous consent. The law is very simple. It eliminates any and all corporate and other business taxes on commercial flagged enterprises inside America. Simultaneously, all capital expenses of business, to include plant building, research and development, shipping costs incurred by the business, will be fully depreciable in the first year they are incurred. This is an accounting mechanism, this last part, you'll forgive me, but it's very, very important, because when businesses build a new factory and expand and do research, presently the depreciation is very long. I want it to be the year it's accomplished. The exchange for losing the requirement to pay tax on the part of business is that business must spend every dime that they receive from this tax law on hiring American workers, working in American factories, plants, and offices, producing American products, and working with American raw materials. In addition, all jobs which have been offshored to other countries to take advantage of cheap labor, frequently slave labor, must be brought home and repatriated to the United States immediately, or the business does not get the tax advantage. How can we make this change come about? The word that I want you to consider most is pressure. You typically do not have very much power. You have the impression politicians don't care about you, don't listen to you. You're right, 98% plus of the time. During a general election cycle, every single member of the lower house is up for election. Many members of the upper house are up, and the president is up. Every single one of these politicians has someone running against them. The pressure that I want brought to bear by people who will follow this program and advocate for it is to go on the local level to your congressman. Maybe you do not know who your congressman is. It's easy enough to find out, and it's easy enough to find him, because he's going to be in your district all summer long looking for votes. When he gets off the plane, the minute he gets off the plane, every time he turns around, I want someone in 10th District, Ohio, 3rd District, Illinois, congressman, I don't care whether he's a Republican or a Democrat, to say, we want this bill. This bill will be on my website. Just print it out. It's not a complicated bill. No taxes in exchange for hiring American workers. Say to these guys, we do not care about any other issue except passing this bill. If enough pressure is brought to bear, these politicians will pass the bill, because if they do not, they will lose. And you say to Congressman Joe in Ohio, Joe, if you do not pass this bill, Fred, who's on the other side of the street, he's running against you, he will win and you will lose. Joe understands this kind of talk. He understands pressure. So individuals who will join with me in this enterprise need to understand how to use pressure on politicians to force them to do something good for the first and likely only time in their life. We are talking about the wholesale manufacturing of a very happy, contented, well-paid, and extremely well-benefited middle class in this country that can take place in a matter of months. Once business knows that the president has made the call for you, Congressman Joe, and you, Senator Smith, and all your friends to come to Washington and have unanimous consent to pass this bill, and he signs it that very day, as soon as he signs it, the factory gates, office gates will fly open. Bosses will tell their hiring people, their accountants, I need to knock my taxes down to zero. Hire people. With respect to offshore jobs, it's simple. Businessmen are smart. They're very sharp. If you say to them, you do not get the tax advantage if you do not bring home jobs that you sent overseas, they will bring home the jobs they sent overseas. The massive amount of money that corporations, mid-sized businesses, even mom and pops get for not having to pay taxes will be such that if you bring these jobs that you pay slave wages overseas to manufacture your goods back here and pay a living wage to American workers in American factories, you will not lose any money. So again, pressure. Businessmen are not going to be hard to pressure. They understand money. They understand the flow of money. So you have, to recapitulate, the power center of politics. Pressure. Congressman Joe, if you do not do this, you are going to lose your election. Mr. Businessman, if you bring home all the jobs that you shipped overseas when you closed your plants here to take benefit of slave labor, cheap labor in other countries, if you bring them home here, you do not have to pay any taxes. Businessmen can figure out in their heads how good a deal that is. The workers themselves. The workers themselves, in many cases, are not working. That's why we're having this talk. That's why this country is in crisis. Some people say the economy is improving. And yet, when I was preparing to make this address, I noted that a major corporation in the United States kicked 50,000 more people out of the door that day. That day. The average age of the man who was thrown out of his job was 48 years old. What does a man of 48 in full career do when he suddenly has no job? The answer is he can't do anything at all. And I want to concentrate with respect to workers on certain demographic groups. The Panic of '08 hit different demographic working groups very differently. For instance, the age group that got hit the worst, the hardest, was the demographic of 18 to 30. This is the young generation. In that generation, you have a full 35% plus of people who either have no job at all or who have a job that is so menial they cannot even afford to live. And they're staying at home, they're staying with friends, etc. This cannot be allowed to stand. You cannot take your upcoming generation and leave them without hope. A lot of these people have university degrees, they've incurred a lot of debt to get their schooling, and they come out of school and they find out there's no jobs and there's not likely to be any jobs. So the country needs a shot in the arm. It needs a shot in the arm that will cause business to massively hire workers right away. After the elections are over, the politicians will go back to being what you think they are, totally uncaring about you. They won't care about you. There'll be no pressure on them to care for you. I want to stress something. I do not care, and the people who follow me do not care, who anyone votes for. We do not advocate